Good afternoon. I'm Tyler Penn. I'm a federal account manager supporting SBA. Account manager can mean a bunch of different things depending on where you're coming from. For us, it really means that trusted advisor. Here supporting customers with new services, programs, introducing customers to AWS partners. I think at the core, just really being that trusted partner as our customers progress throughout their cloud journey. I'm joined today by Ryan Hillard, systems developer with SBA. Ryan and I have been working together for about 3 years now. And really privileged to be here today with Ryan as he shares his modernization journey with SBA. So Ryan, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So I'm here this morning to share with you all the story about how we adopted serverless technology at the Small Business Administration. Now, before we get started, we need to pause here and actually explain some terminology. What is serverless? So serverless is an execution model where your cloud provider takes care of provisioning servers on your behalf. And because this seems to come up quite often, it is technically a misnomer. There are still servers involved. It's just that they're no longer your concern. So, do we have any swimmers in the audience? All right. How about cyclists, people who like to ride bicycles on the weekend? Excellent. And then I'm a runner. How about runners? All right, good deal. Well, I'm here to tell you if you plan on going on a serverless journey, then you may end up actually doing all three. Here's the thing about triathlons. You can easily go 30% faster by drafting off of someone else. So my value proposition to you is to come and draft off of me. I've made a lot of hard mistakes, and I've learned a lot of lessons. And I'm here to share them with you today so that you can go 30% faster. So let's rewind 5 years. It's 2016. I've been hired by the US Small Business Administration to come help with some of the legacy technology issues. I walk out of HR orientation, and my coworker and I are issued one laptop and one phone. That's right, 2 people with one laptop and one phone. You see, the agency at the time had a shortage of both devices. Now, I should have stopped right there and quit, moved back to beautiful Austin, Texas, and called it a day. I wasn't that smart. I stuck around, and for the first 2 weeks, my new friend and I, he would take the phone in the morning, and I would take the phone in the afternoon, and then we would switch. Now, it was a special privilege if you got the laptop on Friday afternoon, because the agency's email servers at the time limited individual inboxes to 100 megabytes. So agency staff had created this habit of deleting all their email on Friday afternoon, so come Monday morning, they'd still be able to receive new messages. This is only 5 years ago. This is 2016. So one of the first projects I was handed was SBA.gov, the agency's main website. I'm going to use SBA.gov as a lens to look through our technology modernization. SBA.gov was the first system to start using serverless technology, and it was also our first system to go fully serverless, meaning it no longer relied on EC2 instances. So this all started when I got my first hosting bill. It was $40,000 for the month. Now, after being only issued 50% of a laptop, I was still naive. I asked, what level of Akamai service are we buying for the website? No Akamai. We're on-prem, using a bunch of servers in a colo in North Virginia. Our first release in that environment took all of 8 hours. The team came down to surprise me for lunch so we could celebrate that release. We ended up whiteboarding a bunch of our problems, and this is an actual picture from the whiteboard that day. We realized we needed to go on a journey. Now, we didn't know it was a triathlon at the time, but we knew we needed to make some big changes. So are you all ready to jump in and start this triathlon with me? Yeah. You're crazy. This is what the beginning of a triathlon actually looks like. Look at these people. They're swimming on top of each other. Look at all that white water. No, before we actually jump in the water, it's important to think about race preparation. My friend Travis Keene is a triathlete, and he's got this piece of advice for us. You're never going to win a race in the swim, but it's easy to lose there. And that's a lot like a new technology project. At the very beginning, you're at your most fragile, and you're also setting the pace for the rest of the project. So let's talk about race preparation, or the environment we want to create so that our team can be successful. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually put on some wetsuits. In a triathlon, wetsuits give you warmth, and they confer on you speed. For us, that meant issuing our entire team, both contractors and federal staff, unlocked MacBooks. We trusted our team with local admin access so that they could go really fast. Now, as a program manager, you're going to have to write a risk acceptance letter. This is kind of what ours looked like, but this is worth it. This is worth it because this translates directly into speed. So from here, we charted a course forward. We sent the entire team to reInvent in 2017, and we were actually there for the announcement of Fargate, AWS's new "we'll run that container for you" service. We thought it was pretty cool. It was kind of like Stargate. It had a nifty name. But the idea of no servers, it was really far away for us. It was like jumping through a portal to an alien world. Now, in typical AWS fashion, they released a new session. It filled up immediately. I didn't get in. But what I did do is I went to 100-level sessions for EBS, EFS, and S3. And this was mind-opening for me because I was able to map old things that I knew, like how to provision a disk or how to install a file system, to new cloud services like EBS and EFS. And when I understood that S3 could accept any n number of objects of an arbitrary size, the whole concept of serverless really made itself valuable to me. So from here, your job is to give your team goggles. And that really means sharing your business problems so you can have a clear vision forward. For us on SBA.gov, one problem we had was reliability. Anytime the site saw a huge influx of traffic, it would either suffer service degradation or just go down. We brought everyone into our big red circle of trust, and we gave our entire development team /* access in our AWS account. Now, I know what you're thinking. At the bottom of every mushroom cloud is the decision to give someone full access to some service. I was thinking it too, which is why we immediately developed this account segmentation strategy. We took our real production data and we put it in a new account we called Upper. And then we left that full access environment available in our lower account, but we filled it with generated data or fake data. From here, it's important to take the water temperature. You're about to take some big leaps. You're about to jump into the unknown. And someone's bound to raise a risk flag. As a program, we got in the habit of forcing those risk raisers to actually quantify the risk. An example of this was how we treated our environments on the internet. The how we used to always do things wisdom would tell you that your development environment should not be accessible on the internet. But when I heard this constraint, all I saw were speeding tickets. I knew that anytime a developer worked off the secured network or a business stakeholder wanted to preview something in a lower environment, we were going to have to pay a speeding ticket. So we asked that risk raiser to actually quantify the risk. And what we found out is that SBA.gov is actually a fully public information system. There was none. So today, all of our environments are accessible to the internet. So from here, your final step in race preparation is to actually start and sync. And this is a pet peeve of mine. The federal government hires 80% of its workforce as contractors. And then it turns around and it treats them like second-class citizens. You as a program manager, your job is to make everyone feel valued. You should all be lining up on the same set of starting blocks, and you should all be starting together. How do you know that one of these people is a contractor? Is it because you label contractors in your global address list with the word contractor? This is the worst example of this practice. When this dies, we'll know we've actually changed government. All right, we've done a bunch of race prep. We've got a wetsuit on, we've charted a course, goggles on our head, we've taken the temperature, and now we're all ready to start and sync. What's the point of this big exercise, all of this preparation? Well, we want to create an environment of high trust where continuous experimentation can happen. Okay, are you all ready? Now it's time to jump in. Now we're ready for the swim. Okay, zip up that wetsuit, pull those goggles down over your eyes, and let's jump in. The first thing we did is we took our old on-premise budget and we separated out $50,000 and we put that in a cloud fund. We said, this is how we're going to pay for AWS. From there, we had to actually issue a contract. This is where we ran into some difficulty. Our procurement team had a hard time wrapping their head around the idea of a firm fixed price contract per year where we were going to get a variable bill every month based off of our cloud consumption. Our breakthrough came when we started working with a contracting officer who had previously worked at FEMA. You see, FEMA buys all of their water a year in advance, and then as disasters occur, they issue water appropriate to the given situation. We successfully related that idea to this concept of cloud credit, where we're buying it a year in advance, but then we're actually spending it as we use it. We issued a contract. This is our statement of objectives. It really can be this simple. This is real contract language. We said we wanted compute, storage, and network in unlimited quantities across all AWS services. We issued this on NASA Soup 5, and a few weeks later, we were off to the duck races. Now, I want to pause here and just issue a warning about currents. There's this trend in government where folks think, I work for the government, there's this thing called GovCloud, it was clearly built for me, I'm going to go use it. And I'm here to warn you because the same accreditation exists in both the commercial cloud and GovCloud for any system with an impact level of moderate or below. So you owe it to yourself to make this evaluation because products actually come more slowly to GovCloud. If you have a system that can run in the commercial cloud and you plan on leveraging serverless technology, you will benefit by using just US East or just US West. That's what we do with SBA.gov. From here, your job is to experiment rapidly. As a program, you need to build expertise and you need to learn services. We're pretty far into this AWS presentation. We haven't talked about any services. That's kind of weird. So let's talk about what services we rely on. These are our critical 8 services. I'm going to break them down for you by functional area. So we use API Gateway and CloudFront, AWS's content delivery network, for request management. Fargate and Lambda are our compute platforms. S3 and EFS are where we store assets like images and video and log files. And then for databases, we rely on Dynamo and RDS. Do you remember where we started, though, in that co-location with all those old dusty servers? Well, that's actually where we started experimenting as well. Those servers were running Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6. And we started out by trying to containerize our workloads. Now, we ran into an issue here. RHEL 6 was running an old version of the Linux kernel. It didn't like running Docker. We worked through the problems. We got those workloads to be both portable and reproducible. And then we jumped straight into the Amazon Elastic Container Service, or ECS. However, we realized we had incurred a double maintenance cost. We were now cutting images. We were creating images for our ECS hosts. And then we were also creating images for our containers to run on top of those hosts. I went back and interviewed our infrastructure lead, Charles, to see, jog my memory here, what kind of difficulties did we deal with? And he started with, why did we even move to containers? Well, we got really sick of hearing, well, it works on my box, but not yours, what's wrong with you? And we decided that we were going to follow our security team's advice and use RHEL in the cloud just like we were doing on-premise. Now, this incurred that cost of having to cut our own server images because RHEL doesn't come with the ECS agent installed on it. So I finally just said, Charles, what's a specific example of this? And he described this situation where we got really good at overwhelming the ECS orchestrator by giving it overladen or overburdened hosts. Finally, he just said, you know what? You think it's just a server. It's not that bad. It kind of is that bad. And from here, we remembered that 2017 announcement. We remembered Fargate. So we tried out managed containers. We ran into another problem, though. We have a lot of legacy applications. Those legacy applications were built in a former time, a time when developers could assume that their application would have access to a file system. Fargate at the time did not support mounting EFS drives. So we started swimming in another direction. We started swimming towards Lambda. And at this point, I just want you all to know your program's going to feel like, your developers are going to feel like this is very unnatural. We're lone developers in this big ocean of new technology. Many of them confided in me something similar to this. I'm really excited. It took me 3 minutes to deploy my Lambda, but I've spent the last 3 days trying to get it to just run. You're going to run into other big questions like, how do I see my logs? How do I develop locally? How do I even reference files inside of a Lambda? And my advice to you is to do what we did, start small. We started by converting our cron jobs to Lambda. This is a low-risk way to achieve a huge mental shift. You're now not required to run every single part of the system actually on the system. You can run them in parallel. Okay, you've been swimming for a while. At this point, expect deviations to happen. Here's the thing about navigating underwater. It's really hard. In a competitive open water swim, every time you stop to look up and find your point of reference, you're no longer swimming forward at an optimal rate. So my friend Travis has more advice for us. The best swims are ones where you're touching the toes of the person in front of you. So now, without making this too weird, I want you all to come and touch my toes on this one. One course deviation we made is we wrote our own infrastructure management tool called AWS CFT tools. There are a lot of problems with this. You are on the hook to support it forever. If someone's missing a feature, it's actually your feature set that's limited. And ultimately, our project didn't solve the fundamental CloudFormation challenges that we were wrestling with. So we made a correction. We started adopting Terraform, and there are a lot of benefits to Terraform. It's somebody else's project. It's always growing. There's plenty of Stack Overflow on the internet to support the tool. It's got a large community. And most of all, it has this really ergonomic developer feedback loop. And by that, I mean it tells you immediately what it's going to do. So you can learn how to deploy cloud infrastructure very rapidly. All right. You've course corrected, but now let's double check here and make sure we're swimming at the right buoy. Swimming to the right buoy for us meant identifying which values we wanted to use to select our AWS services. At the end of the day, we settled on this idea that we wanted all of our infrastructure to be immutable, sustainable, and scalable. One of our infrastructure engineers used to always say, it's not actually a value to say we're serverless, we're not going to run anything on the server. We need to do better than that. We need to use real values to make these selections. One of the buoys that we decided was wrong for us was Kubernetes. And I'm here to kind of suggest that Kubernetes is probably wrong for you too. We realized that our workloads weren't large enough for Kubernetes. In fact, I can only think of 2 federal workloads that might be: the IRS on April 15th every year, and the SBA right after the PPP program launched. And guess what? We didn't use Kubernetes. So we've chosen the right buoy. I've got some good news for you. At some point, this whole journey is going to start feeling natural. And that's when I want you to stop and enjoy the race. So what do I mean by this? What I mean is that developing in a serverless paradigm means you're building a distributed system in these highly functional, beautiful pieces. And that means you have fewer rollbacks. I've never met a developer that likes to roll back their code. So in this way, you're always swimming forward, and it's a more natural way of moving, a more natural way of building systems. Okay, this is stage 1. Let's review our course map. We've come pretty far. It's time to shake that water off. You guys ready to ride into the next phase, the cycle? Okay, let's get down on our imaginary bicycles. We're going to start pedaling. And the first thing we need to do, we need to form a pack. You guys remember the 30% from the very beginning? If we form a pack, we're all headed in the same direction, and we can draft off of each other. One of the things that we did to form a pack is we sent our entire group to an AWS serverless immersion day. This spanned 4 different systems, and it covered 40 people. Tyler, can you tell us about Immersion Days a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So Immersion Days are day-long in-person courses led by our AWS solution architects, really meant to get you familiar with our AWS services, but I think more importantly, take those services and then apply them to a project that you're doing or a key mission objective. On our next slide, we have an example of a serverless immersion day, and this is the one we actually use for SBA. And just a few quick points on these. I think the first, like Ryan mentioned, is include all your team, so contractors, staff, leadership, anyone that might be involved in the project, they should be at that immersion day, learning that content and going through the labs. The second point is use the labs. Definitely build those in. Many of the immersion days have labs sort of pre-built or baked into the schedule. But if not, encourage your account manager or the account team you're working with to include those. Those really let you take that content you've just learned and apply it right away in the AWS console. And the last point is really, we have a ton of variety with our immersion days. So wherever you're at in your cloud journey, don't feel like you can't use an immersion day. There's probably one for a foundation if you're just starting, or modernization, across a whole variety. So take advantage of those, just like Ryan and his team did.
All right, so coming out of your immersion day, hopefully you're formed into a pack. You look like this, you're streamlined, you're moving really fast. Now it's time to watch out for potholes. So one of the potholes we ran into was this dated or legacy change control process. Does anybody else have a change control board that meets at this frequency every Tuesday, Thursday, and if you miss one, you got to go to the other? Yeah. You're trying to be a speeding bullet here. You're working in the cloud. You want to go fast. You can't use a change control process like that anymore. So one of the things we did is we actually redefined most of our changes. And we redefined them so that they could be adjudicated using GitHub. Here's an example of one. And what we found is that this lets our developers work asynchronously and very quickly, but it's also something our auditors love, because now change documentation is connected directly to code. And they love that, right? That's a beautiful thing. So we still have our enterprise change control board. Here's an example of one of those requests. But now, under our new definitions, we really just use it for truly enterprise changes. Now, when we did this, I was actually pretty nervous about it. I thought, oh, these people are sitting on this enterprise board. They're going to feel disenfranchised. We're taking things away from them. But what we found is they actually cared more once we started bringing them only truly enterprise-level changes. That was kind of a surprise silver lining. So from here, expect some broken chains. You're in a bike race. Things are going to break. You're going to lose components. One of these, or an example of a broken chain in our journey, was breaking our system inventory process. So FSMA requires that every system compile a list of all the assets that make up that system. And in yesteryear, we used to go and count our networks, and then we would count all the servers living on those networks, and then we would count all the disks on the servers, and we would compile that all up into a big spreadsheet. And that worked when we only did this every 5 years. But we're working in the cloud now. We're spinning things up on Monday that we shut down on Tuesday. And what we found is our security team didn't actually know what was running where, and that was a big problem. So we automated system inventories. And we did that using CloudWatch events, which is a time-based trigger. That time-based trigger kicks off a Lambda. The Lambda function assumes a role in all of our different AWS accounts, and it scans those accounts for which assets are in them. It then takes that list, and it formats in the formula that our security team expects, and it stores that in S3. We estimated that we saved about $90,000 a year in cost avoidance by doing this, but that's not the real value. The real value for us was that we started to build a partnership with our security team, where we provided automation and saved them time, and they used that time to reinvest in us by reviewing new services we wanted to use. So you fix some broken chains. At this point in our program, we realized there was a lot of organic growth happening. Some of our teams were really taking to this serverless stuff. They were sprouting into these beautiful trees. And then some of them were still seedlings. They were a little more cautious. And as a program, we decided we wanted some consistency across the enterprise. So we hired a team car. In a bicycle race, a team car is a car that follows your athletes around and brings them replacement equipment, water, you name it. In our case, this meant we wanted a DevOps team. We issued a statement of objectives. It looks like this. This is real contract language again. And it said, we want this team to support development teams, integrate with security, improve the resiliency of each of our systems, maximize our cost savings, and then reduce our overall attack surface. And all 5 of those things together should add up to mean we're adopting this concept of enterprise infrastructure. Or in other words, we want to be like a Daft Punk album. We want to be better, faster, stronger. Now, one of the things that people often miss is it's actually harder. Great infrastructure requires investment, and it requires focus. So we wanted a DevOps team. We got a platform team at the end of the day. Some people would call this a DevOps anti-pattern. They would look at this and say, you know what, each one of your teams, they should be practicing DevOps. You shouldn't form a DevOps team. But I'm here to challenge that idea by asking you, what's your environment look like? For us, our environment at the SBA is this icy road. It's hard to get traction. And our platform team, our team car, it's this car with snow tires. It helps accelerate our technology transformation one system at a time. So what does the platform team do that we think works? First, they make support agreements with each team that they have an engagement with. Here's an example of real support agreements with our Enterprise Learning Initiative folks. And they cover 3 big areas: what collaboration tools they're going to use, which shared rituals they're going to observe as a team. Are they going to go to their sprint planning, sprint review, those sorts of things? And then finally, how are they going to navigate code changes? You've got 2 teams working in one code base. Who's going to review pull requests? Who's going to merge? Who's going to build? All those sorts of things. As my friend Tyler likes to say, you come and learn a little bit about my world. I'll learn a little bit about yours. And at the end of the day, together, both of our lives will be better. And I love this quote because it's really about the essence of DevOps. So from here, that team, that platform team, they bring this relentless sense of focus. And we found that they work best when they're given 6 weeks, bare minimum, to work with an individual team to accelerate their journey. But ideally, they should be given a total of 12 weeks or 1 calendar quarter. From focus, we're able to pursue high standards. This is really following the Gene Kim model of DevOps, where we get feedback, we optimize for global goals, and then we continuously improve. We were able to drive standards across our enterprise by converting systems one by one. All right. And this metaphor, that means kind of like bringing really nice bicycles or really nice equipment to each one of your athletes or your development teams. All right, we've been cycling for a while. You're going to run into some flat tires. One flat tire that we encountered was with how one of our developers was using S3. Now, this first developer was storing static assets, like images and video, on S3 and fronting those assets via CloudFront. This is actually a very legitimate use of S3. It's an awesome use of S3. But then another developer came along and started storing sensitive log files in that same bucket. Now, we got really lucky. When our security team investigated, they found that we had access logging turned on, and that while we had exposure, no one had actually downloaded those log files, so we didn't have a breach or any kind of compromise. In the wake of that, our chief information security officer confided in me that our challenge now was to keep the organization from overreacting. I like this quote because it gets at this idea that we should build a culture of resilience. We're going to make mistakes, that's okay. So from here, in order to regain some speed, we adopted this idea of a savings plan. Has anyone ever had that awkward conversation where you're talking to a team and they want to do this upgrade, but they realize they still have 6 months left on their reserved instances? Well, Tyler, how about you tell us how we got out of that conversation?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So just a quick fun fact, savings plans we announced November 6th of 2019, and the morning of November 8th, Ryan and team sent an email saying they had bought their savings plan. So literally 24 hours later, which I think you were the first federal customer to make that purchase, Ryan, by the way. But what I also love about that sort of quick anecdote just shows how easy savings plans can be. I think we've all spent a lot of time with our eyes, getting that analysis done, trying to match to the right instance type, size, OS. And savings plan sort of removes a lot of that complexity and makes it easier for our customers. So on the screen, I have our 3 current savings plans, the compute savings plans, EC2 instance savings plans, and our new SageMaker savings plans. As you can see, it's flexible across instance region, or instance family, region, OS, tenancy. That last bullet, though, I think is particularly important. Savings plans also apply across EC2, Fargate, and Lambda. So back to Ryan's sort of earlier comment, if you make the purchase of a savings plan and you are leveraging EC2, there's no restriction to going into serverless and leveraging Lambda or Fargate. So it really lets you as a customer continue that modernization journey, and I think certainly the case with SBA, and a great call to use the compute savings plan there, Ryan.
All right, so we've got a savings plan and we're climbing that cloud maturity model quickly. We're done with our cycling. This is our course map. We've come pretty far. We're almost at the end of this race here. But this is the part where it matters most, because now we're in the run and we're sprinting to the end. So, excuse me. So, let's transition into running. The first thing we need to do is put on our running shoes and double knot those laces. So, by that we mean we adopted this concept of double knot deployments. We quickly realized that we needed to break our developers out of this standard git, commit, push, merge workflow, where our CI/CD pipelines were building and deploying based off of which code lived in which branch. We moved away from that because we started to co-locate our infrastructure code with our application code, and we started building everything in these functional, smaller pieces. And what we realized is our development team started to trip over their own shoelaces. We were deploying things not quite when we really wanted to. So we broke them out of that, and we moved them to a Git tagging strategy. I like a Git tagging strategy because it adds this intentionality to a deployment. It forces the developer to stop and say, this commit, I want this commit to build, it's version 1.0. It's a lot like double knotting your shoelaces before you go running. You're sure that you want them to stay on. So from here, we actually radioed to the future. Tyler, we really need EFS support in ECS. Can you help us out, man?
That's a good copy, Ryan. We'll go ahead and put in a product feature request. Over. So just real quickly, like Ryan mentioned, product feature requests are a great way to radio to the future. I really see it as the direct line from our customers to our service teams. And personally, I take a lot of pride in it. I know our account team does, and at AWS we do as well. Over 90% of our features and services actually come from customer requests. So super important, and definitely encourage them to be used. I have just a quick snapshot of SBA's product feature requests, and with some data removed. But I think the real key thing here is to show that it's meticulously tracked, and you can look over into about the 6th or 7th column and see that it's tracked by stage as well. So when you put that request in, you work closely with your account team, and they're going to know exactly where it's at and be able to report back to you and give you a real accurate status of that. I sort of liken it to us being, the Doc Brown for our customers, if you're familiar with Back to the Future. So we get to work with our customer, put that request in, and then, get you back to the future into the console where, hopefully that request or that feature or new service is released for you to leverage. In the case of SBA, we were able to eventually get persistent storage for Fargate in the form of EFS. So SBA, along with many other customers, help make that feature happen. So thanks, Ron.
Yeah, so we had this epiphany. We realized that all of those legacy workloads, those content management systems like Drupal and WordPress that couldn't run on Fargate without EFS, we suddenly could, right? We could realize a serverless enterprise. As one of our engineers said, Fargating became fun. It was like tailgating, but with tech. Now, as a manager, whenever I hear someone on my team seriously use the word fun to describe work, I know that we're in a good spot. That team is working well, and we're headed in the right direction. So from there, we radioed across our organization. We created this concept of a reference architecture repository, where we could start to develop a canon describing how we at the SBA deploy serverless architecture using infrastructure as code. This repository is public. It's on GitHub. Go check it out. It's got two types of things in it. One, it's got practical guides on how to do this, how to deploy serverless. You remember that flat tire we encountered, that pesky S3 bucket? Well, this is a README describing for any of our dev teams how to take a public S3 bucket and make it private. We also have research spikes. So this is the TLDR on Aurora Serverless version 2 and what value we think it has to offer for us in our program. So we've transitioned, we're running now. From here, we settle on a few daily tools. The first is Terraform. We use Terraform to provision long-lived infrastructure, and then we use the serverless framework to provision volatile things like Lambda, the application code that changes often. Now, you need to go on your own journeys here. You need to pick your own tools. But one piece of advice I have for you is choose a tool that provides an ergonomic wrapper around CloudFormation. CloudFormation has some challenges. And while the serverless framework still uses CloudFormation, it obfuscates the difficult parts of it. So let's look at an example of infrastructure as code written in Terraform. This code describes an Nginx web server. And one of the things it does is it allows us to specify how many web servers we want per environment. This ability to use logic to describe your infrastructure is something you should be looking for in a tool of your choosing. The next thing it allows us to do is reuse our code by defining it into modules. This example uses two modules. One we wrote called Easy Fargate, and then a community module called VPC. We've written 14 of these modules. They're on the Terraform registry. They're all public. Please go check them out. Finally, the tool you choose should provide that ergonomic feedback loop I talked about, where it's telling you exactly what it's going to create, modify, or delete, and it's telling that to you quickly. Terraform has a performance CLI that does just that. So from here, it's just a matter of running the next 5K. We converted our systems one by one in 3-month cycles. I went back and I asked Travis, after a 2-mile swim and a 100-mile bike ride, how in the world do you start a marathon? And he looked at me and he said, Ryan, I don't run a marathon. I run 5 5-mile races, one at a time. And I love this insight because it's a lot like a big technology project. You do your best work when you're working in these small increments and you're chaining those increments together to make big progress over time. Each one of our 5-mile races were these systems. 3 of these are totally serverless today. The Certify system is in progress. Kevin Lee, our product owner, is here. And he tells me we're on schedule to convert this within the next month or 2. So let's talk about metrics. It's very important that you measure progress in this journey. In a triathlon, the best metric is actually heart rate. And it's heart rate because it's adaptive. It takes into account both environmental conditions, like do you have a headwind in this race, or is the technology you're working with particularly old or difficult, and physiological variables, like are you coming down with a cold that day, or is your team struggling to form? Now, I think of infrastructure like an agile product owner does. I don't measure user stories or bugs or any low-level thing. I'm interested in knowing how often are my users getting new features and new things that they care about, new value. Let's look at one of our Terraform modules, Easy Fargate. This is charting for the last year or so. how often we do code changes. What do you see about this module? Well, every 2 to 3 months, we're making significant changes that correspond with feature releases. We're regularly updating this module or providing value to our development teams that use it. Zooming out a little bit, let's look at all of our modules plotted against feature releases. The first thing you're probably going to notice is this weird spike. This was our documentation push last October. Yes, we do consider documentation to be a feature. Excuse me. So jumping past this, let's look at the metric I really care about. In the last 10 months, the team has released, on average, about 3 new features a month. This is our metric to track. This is our heart rate. This shows us that we're making progress in our journey. All right, so I have one last piece of advice for you all. Keep drinking water. When you move to the cloud, it becomes incredibly easy to stand up new infrastructure. You can run farther than you possibly could before. And you have to remember to keep drinking water. And by that I mean those standard environments you're used to working with, development, staging, and production, they're actually good enough. As 2 of our tech leads would say, and they're very different people, so that's why I love these 2 quotes, the management cost of a lot of environments, they grow in a polynomial dimension to their benefits. Or just because you can doesn't mean you actually should. So in January 2021, we crossed that finish line. SBA.gov went fully serverless. Here's what our cluster looks like, our production cluster looks like in January. As you can see, we have no EC2 servers, and everything is running on top of Fargate. All of our servers have become containers. Here's a list of the tasks. What does SBA.gov look like by the numbers, though? We've got 15 API gateway endpoints, 6 Fargate clusters, 108 S3 buckets, and 7 RDS clusters. And do you remember that 8-hour deployment time that we started with? Well, the team deploys about an average of 8 minutes today. What does this look like from a cost perspective, though? That first year, FY18, we saved 87%. In FY19, we saved 83%. And then in FY20, we saved 52%. Now, this is a really pretty picture of moving to the cloud and saving a bunch of money. But it's not a very accurate one. Once we roll in this idea of the engineering costs we spent in order to make this migration, we see a much more realistic picture. 12% in 18, 19, or 45% in 19, and 13% in 20. But I'm here to challenge this idea that cost savings is the value of the cloud. If we do this what-if analysis to consider what would have happened if we needed this same infrastructure we run today and we'd still been on-premise, we can see that by FY20, our costs would have quickly had spiraled out of control. So here's the conclusion I want to leave you with. When the President of the United States tweets out your website, you have some of the most sweatiest moments of your life. This is what our CloudFront distribution looks like that day. We moved almost 28 terabytes worth of data. These are web page loads. We went from 3,000 users to 90,000 users in the course of 5 minutes. We saw 0 service disruption and 0 downtime. In conjunction with this, we were handed a project to build a portal for small community-based lenders to place paycheck protection loans. We built Lender Gateway in conjunction with AWS Professional Services in a week. Lender Gateway processed 140,000 loans, moving $15 billion and saving millions of jobs. Afterwards, I joked with the team that they had all peaked in their careers. They would never do 1 week of work that would have this much positive impact in the world ever again. This is what Lender Gateway's architecture looks like. You might notice something. It's entirely serverless. If we hadn't have started to embark on this cloud journey years ago, and we hadn't have delved into serverless technology, we wouldn't have been able to build a system like this under a timeline like the one we were given. And that's my bold claim to you this morning. If not for the rapid adoption of cloud and serverless, the SBA would not have survived the demands of the global pandemic. We would not have been able to meet the requirements put on us by the American people. So listen to my friend Jim here, the CIO at VA, and remember to outsource the commodity while you insource your complexity. And in our brave new world of technology, your servers, they are a commodity. Your business logic, your application code, that complexity that you and only you understand, that's what you should be focusing on. So go out and conquer. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't publicly thank the team who made this happen. I'm just one lucky guy who gets to stand up here and present for you all. On the top row, we've got John King, Aaron Brooks, Candace Campbell, Jeremy Walter, and Doug Robertson. These are the key players in our SBA.gov infrastructure journey. And then on the bottom row, we have Charles Bouchon, Jason Smigovsky, Matt Jorgensen, Tyler Webb, and Kevin Lee. These are the folks on our platform team, that team car, who have accelerated our journey more widely.
Yeah, and then likewise, just want to also thank the broader AWS team. On the top row, we have Kyle, Gottman, Jared, Kevin, and Tom. And then on the bottom row, Kyle and Priyanka. Certainly a really small team compared to everyone that joined to help, from AWS Professional Services, our services teams. Really just big group effort, and lucky to be a partner here with SBA on this journey.
All right, so I've overlaid for everyone the key dates in our journey with our course map. So this is the journey we've been on, and I think we can use this as a reference when we do questions and answers. So I think Q&A time.
Sounds great.
All right.